My name is Emily Carter. I'm 38 years old, and exactly 1 year ago, my husband looked at our newborn daughter and walked away. Not because he didn't love me, not because we were struggling, not because our marriage had failed. He left because our baby wasn't a boy. I wish I were exaggerating. I wish this were one of those stories where people misunderstood each other. It wasn't. The moment changed my life forever. And the worst part? The woman he left me for was my best friend. Her name was Rachel. For 20 years, she had been like a sister to me. We met in high school, shared apartments, shared secrets, shared heartbreaks. She stood beside me at my wedding, held my hand when my mother died, and sat beside my hospital bed while I was giving birth. At least, that's what I thought. Now, when I look back, I wonder if she was waiting for my life to fall apart all along. Before everything happened, my life looked perfect. My husband Daniel was 42, successful sales executive, charming, confident, the kind of man people immediately trusted. We'd been married for 12 years, and after years of fertility treatments, we were finally having a baby. Or at least, that's what everyone celebrated, especially Daniel's family. His father constantly talked about continuing the family name. His mother bought blue baby clothes before we even knew the gender. Every family dinner became the same conversation. When the boy arrives, when your son grows up, when Daniel finally has his heir. At first, I laughed. Then I stopped laughing, because nobody ever said baby. They always said boy, as though there were no other possibility. At 20 weeks, we found out the gender. A girl. I cried happy tears. Daniel forced a smile, but I noticed it immediately. The disappointment, the silence, the tension in his jaw. That night, he barely spoke. I tried convincing myself I imagined it. I wanted to believe the man I loved wasn't upset about something so ridiculous. But over the next few months, he became colder, more distant, more irritated. The nursery remained unfinished. The baby books collected dust. And every time someone mentioned our daughter, his enthusiasm seemed forced. Rachel noticed too. One afternoon, she sat beside me at a coffee shop. "Daniel seems different." I sighed. "He's stressed." She gave me a strange look. "Are you sure?" I nodded, because I didn't want to admit the truth, not even to myself. Then came the day our daughter was born. 21 hours of labor, complications, fear, pain, and finally, the most beautiful little girl I'd ever seen. The nurse placed her in my arms. Tiny fingers, tiny nose, tiny heartbeat. I fell in love instantly. Daniel looked at her, then looked away. I remember the exact moment because it felt wrong. Every father I'd ever seen cried, smiled, laughed. Daniel looked disappointed, like someone had handed him the wrong package. The nurse asked if he wanted to hold her. He hesitated, actually hesitated, before taking his own daughter. Something inside me broke. But I told myself he was overwhelmed. New fathers react differently, right? 3 days later, I learned the truth. I was home from the hospital, exhausted, sleep-deprived, trying to breastfeed, trying not to cry every 5 minutes. Rachel came over to help, or at least that's what she claimed. She held the baby while I showered, made dinner, comforted me, acted like the perfect friend. That evening, Daniel arrived late, again. He barely acknowledged me, barely looked at the baby. Then he said words I'll never forget. "We need to talk." Every woman knows that sentence. The room suddenly felt cold. I sat down slowly. Rachel stood nearby, holding my daughter. Daniel rubbed his forehead, then looked directly at me. "I'm not happy." I laughed nervously. "What does that even mean?" He didn't laugh. "I can't do this." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" He stared at the floor, then, finally, said it. "I wanted a son." For several seconds, I couldn't process what I'd heard. "You wanted a son?" He nodded. "I always wanted a son." I blinked. What does that have to do with anything? Then he said something so cruel, I still hear it sometimes. "Everything." The room went silent. I stared at him. He continued. "I thought I'd eventually get over it." My hands started shaking, but every time I look at her, he pointed toward our daughter, I feel disappointed. My heart shattered, not for me, for her, for our innocent little girl, 21 days old and already rejected. I looked at Rachel, waiting for her to defend me, waiting for her to tell him he was insane. Instead, she looked down, avoiding eye contact. That was the first moment I felt afraid, really afraid, because suddenly something felt wrong. Daniel stood up. "I'm leaving." My breath caught. "What?" "I'm moving out." "No." "Emily, no." I could barely breathe. "You can't leave because we had a daughter." His expression hardened. "You don't understand." Then Rachel whispered something so quiet I almost missed it. "Maybe this is for the best." I turned toward her slowly. For the first time, I saw guilt on her face. And suddenly, everything made sense. The late nights, the distance, the phone calls, the secrecy, the coldness. My voice became barely audible. "Rachel." Nobody answered. Nobody needed to, because silence answered for them. My entire world collapsed, right there in my living room, while my newborn daughter slept in Rachel's arms. My best friend started crying. Daniel stepped toward her protectively. Protectively. Not towards me, towards her. That's when I knew. It wasn't new. It wasn't a mistake. It had been happening for a long time. I felt physically sick. Rachel handed me my daughter, like she was returning borrowed property. Then Daniel delivered the final blow, the sentence that haunted me for months. "Maybe Rachel can finally give me the son I deserve." I couldn't speak, couldn't cry, couldn't move. All I could do was hold my baby girl and watch her tiny breathing, wondering how two people I loved more than anything could destroy me so completely. But I had no idea. The worst humiliation of my life was still coming. The first 6 months after Daniel left were the hardest of my life. Not because I missed him. That illusion died quickly. It was because I had to learn how to survive, alone, with a newborn and a broken heart. Every morning started the same way. A crying baby, bills I couldn't pay, and a silence so heavy it felt physical. Daniel didn't just leave, he disappeared. He stopped helping, stopped calling, stopped acting like a father. His daughter became an inconvenience he preferred to forget. The only communication I received came through lawyers, child support negotiations, paperwork, excuses, delays. Everything except accountability. Meanwhile, Rachel proudly posted photos online. Vacation pictures, romantic dinners, smiling selfies with Daniel. They acted like they were the victims, like they had found true love, as if my marriage and my family were simply collateral damage. At first, I tortured myself by looking. Every post felt like another knife. Then one night, I stopped. I deleted every social media app, every photo, every reminder. And for the first time, I focused entirely on my daughter. Her name was Lily. She became my reason for getting out of bed, my reason for fighting, my reason for refusing to quit. Because every time I looked at her, I saw someone worth protecting, someone worth building a future for, someone who deserved better than the people who abandoned her. So I made a decision. I would stop waiting for someone to save me and save myself instead. The first step was work. Before Lily was born, I'd worked as an office administrator for a regional construction supplier. Nothing glamorous, but I understood contracts, scheduling, budgets, operations. When Lily started sleeping through the night, I began taking online courses, business management, financial systems, project coordination. Every spare moment became an investment. Not because I dreamed of becoming rich, because I needed stability. Slowly, things started changing. I landed freelance work, then consulting contracts, then larger clients. The money wasn't life-changing, but it was enough. Enough to pay bills, enough to stop panicking every time my phone rang, enough to breathe. And with every small victory, I became stronger. Exactly 1 year after Daniel left, I barely recognized the woman staring back from the mirror. I wasn't healed, not completely, but I wasn't broken anymore. Then, fate decided to test me. It happened at Lily's preschool fundraiser. The event was being held at a large community center. Parents everywhere, teachers, children, local businesses. Nothing dramatic, just a normal Saturday afternoon. Lily wore a yellow dress. She looked adorable, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. Then I heard a familiar voice. "Well, look who it is." My stomach dropped instantly. I turned around. Daniel, standing beside Rachel, both smiling, both dressed like they were attending a magazine photo shoot. And Rachel was pregnant. Very pregnant. The message couldn't have been clearer. I immediately understood why they were there. To show off, to win, to prove something. Daniel looked me up and down, then smiled. The same arrogant smile I used to mistake for confidence. "Emily." I nodded politely. "Daniel." Rachel crossed her arms. Neither of them even acknowledged Lily, their own daughter. That told me everything. Then Daniel looked around. "Still living in the apartment?" I stared at him. "What?" "The apartment," he laughed. "You know, the one you moved into after everything." Rachel smirked. My chest tightened. Not because it hurt, because it reminded me how little they'd changed. I answered calmly, "No." His eyebrows lifted. "Oh?" "We moved." Rachel exchanged a glance with him. Then came the comment, the one they clearly rehearsed, the one meant to humiliate me. Daniel chuckled. "Good for you." Pause. Although I guess someone has to survive somehow. Several parents nearby turned toward us, listening, watching. My face grew warm. Not from embarrassment, from disbelief. 1 year later, and he still needed to put me down. Then Rachel added, "At least Lily seems happy." Seems happy, like she was talking about a pet, not a child, not a little girl they helped abandon. I looked at Lily. She was coloring quietly, completely unaware. Thank God. Then Daniel leaned closer and delivered the line he thought would destroy me. "Honestly, Emily," he smiled, "I guess things worked out the way they were supposed to." I understood exactly what he meant. Rachel was carrying a baby boy, the son he'd always wanted, the replacement family, the upgrade, at least in his mind. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger, I felt pity. Because after everything, he still measured people by what they could give him. Then something unexpected happened. A black luxury SUV pulled into the parking lot. The vehicle stopped near the entrance. Several people turned to look. A tall man stepped out. Expensive suit, confident posture, professional demeanor. The kind of person who looked important without trying. The moment he saw me, he smiled, then started walking directly towards us. Daniel noticed. Rachel noticed. Everyone noticed. The man reached us. "Emily." I smiled. "Good afternoon." Michael Harper, CEO of Harper Development Group, one of my largest consulting clients, and one of the most respected business owners in the state. Daniel's confident expression disappeared instantly because he recognized the name. Everyone in business recognized the name. Michael shook my hand warmly, then looked toward Lily. "Is this the young lady I've heard so much about?" Lily smiled. He handed her a stuffed teddy bear. Her face lit up. Daniel stared, confused. Rachel stared, shocked. Michael looked at me. "The board approved everything." My heart skipped. "Already?" He nodded. "Congratulations." Daniel frowned. "What board?" Michael turned politely. "The new Regional Operations Division." Silence. Then Michael smiled at me again. "You'll be officially running it next month." Daniel's face went pale, because suddenly the woman he'd abandoned wasn't struggling, wasn't surviving, wasn't failing. She was succeeding, without him. But what happened next was something none of us expected. Because 3 weeks later, Daniel called me, for the first time in nearly a year. And when I answered, he was crying. When Daniel called me 3 weeks later, I almost didn't answer. His name appeared on my screen, and for a moment, I simply stared at it. A year earlier, seeing that name would have made my heart race. Now, I felt nothing, just curiosity. I answered, "Hello?" For several seconds, there was only silence. Then I heard something unexpected. Daniel was crying. Not fake crying, not sympathy crying. Real crying. The kind that comes from genuine fear. "Emily," his voice cracked. I sat down slowly. "What happened?" More silence. Then he whispered, "I need help." I closed my eyes. Of course. The first honest thing he'd said to me over a year. Not, "How are you?" Not, "How's Lily?" Not, "I'm sorry." Just, "I need help." Because people like Daniel never changed. They simply changed their priorities. "What kind of help?" The answer came immediately. "My company is collapsing." I wasn't surprised. Not even a little. Daniel had spent years believing confidence could replace competence. Eventually, reality catches up. It always does. "What happened?" "The market changed." "No." He sighed. "Bad decisions." Now we were getting somewhere. Over the next 10 minutes, the story spilled out. Failed contracts, poor investments, missed sales targets, debt. Lots of debt. The company he'd left me to protect was falling apart, and apparently his position wasn't secure anymore. Then came the part that finally explained the tears. Rachel left. I blinked. What? 2 months ago. I remained silent. Daniel laughed bitterly, the sound of a man meeting consequences. Turns out things aren't so romantic when the money disappears. For a moment, I actually felt sorry for him. Not because of what happened, because he'd spent his entire life chasing the wrong things. Status, approval, control. And now, all of it was gone. Then he said the words I knew were coming. I made a mistake. There it was, 1 year late, $1 million short, and completely meaningless. I looked out my office window. The city skyline stretched into the distance. A year ago, I would have given anything to hear him say those words. Now, they felt strangely empty. Because apologies don't restore trust. They don't erase betrayal. And they certainly don't give a child her father back. I'm sorry, Emily. I remained quiet. I was wrong. Still quiet. I don't expect forgiveness. Finally, one honest sentence. Then he whispered, I just want a chance. A chance? Funny word, because I'd spent years giving him chances. Second chances, third chances, hundreds of chances. The only person he never gave a chance was his daughter. I ended the call politely, without promises, without anger, without revenge. Just closure. Or so I thought. A week later, the real surprise arrived. It was Lily's preschool graduation ceremony. Nothing fancy. Tiny chairs, tiny caps, tiny children trying not to trip over themselves. Parents filled the room. Cameras flashed. Teachers smiled. The usual chaos. I sat in the front row, watching Lily search for me from the stage. The moment she spotted me, her face lit up, and suddenly every sleepless night felt worth it. Every sacrifice, every tear, every struggle. Worth it. Then I noticed movement near the back. Daniel had arrived. Alone. No Rachel, no audience, no performance. Just Daniel. For the first time, he looked older, smaller, tired, like life had finally stopped protecting him from himself. He stood quietly, watching Lily. Watching the daughter he'd ignored, watching the little girl who looked exactly like him. And for the first time, I saw regret. Real regret. Not because his life fell apart, because he finally understood what he'd thrown away. After the ceremony ended, Lily ran towards me. Then suddenly stopped. She looked at Daniel. Curious. Children always know more than adults think. Mommy? I knelt beside her. Yes, sweetheart? Who's that? The question hit him harder than any punishment ever could. I saw it happen, right there in his eyes. His own daughter didn't know who he was. Because strangers don't become fathers through biology. They become fathers through presence. And Daniel had never shown up. His eyes filled with tears. Lily waited patiently. I could have humiliated him, could have embarrassed him, could have enjoyed the moment. A year ago, maybe I would have. But not anymore. Because revenge no longer interested me. Peace did. I smiled gently. That's Daniel. Lily tilted her head. Daniel crouched slowly. Hi, Lily. She waved politely, like she was greeting a neighbor. Nothing more, nothing less. And somehow that hurt him more than any angry speech ever could.
The following months brought more changes. Daniel lost his job. Rachel moved across the country. The son he'd sacrificed everything for wasn't even his. The DNA test confirmed it. The baby belonged to someone else. When I heard the news, I simply sat there, silent, stunned, because life had written a twist more brutal than anything I could have imagined. The very dream he'd destroyed his family for never existed. Meanwhile, my life continued growing. The new division became a success. The company expanded. My income doubled, then tripled. But the biggest victory wasn't financial. It was personal. For the first time in my life, I trusted myself. I no longer needed validation, no longer needed approval, no longer needed someone else's love to define my worth. One evening, nearly 2 years after Daniel left, I tucked Lily into bed. She wrapped her arms around my neck. "I love you, Mommy." Simple words, but they meant everything. As I turned off the light, she asked a question. "Mommy?" "Yes?" "Are you happy now?" I smiled. A real smile. The kind that comes after surviving things you thought would destroy you. "Yes, sweetheart." She grinned. "Good." Then she fell asleep. I sat beside her bed for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the humiliation, the abandonment. And I realized something important. Daniel didn't leave because I had a daughter. He left because he believed I needed him more than he needed me. He thought my future depended on him. He thought my happiness belonged to him. He thought my value came from being his wife. He was wrong, because losing him didn't ruin my life. It revealed my strength. And the little girl he rejected became the greatest blessing I'd ever received. The daughter he didn't want gave me the future I never knew I deserved. And that was the ending he never saw coming.